Okay, everyone, how are you doing? We're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna bring everyone on screen. I'm trying to do multiple things at once. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Can you hear me all right, Mr. Johnson?
It's a little distant, but I can hear you.
Let me see if I can adjust my Zoom meetings.
All right.
Okay. We are here to talk about the voting. I've got some people helping me run some tech in the back, and there are a couple of people who wished to ask some questions about voting. But first, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Khalid. I am the mayor of the city of South Fulton, Atlanta's new twin city and the blackest city in America. We are very serious about voting here in South Fulton. Let me make sure that my sound is as high as it can go here. We are very serious about voting here in the city of South Fulton. And it had come to my attention over recent days after the May 24th election. There were members who had some concerns about whether the election was conducted properly or legally. They had questions about various things, from the discrepancies in what is listed under Fulton County elections as the vote count versus the vote total, to just concerns about who actually runs the Board of Elections, who has access to the ballots. So I wanted to bring on a member of the Elections Board who lives right here with us in the city of South Fulton to address these issues. And I'm going to go ahead and have you introduce yourself now, sir, Mr. Johnson.
All right. My name is, I hear a little feedback.
I don't hear anything on this end. You're good on this end.
Okay. I don't know if anybody else can hear, but it's really choppy, everything I say.
You're coming through crystal clear on my end. Give me a thumbs up, Mr. Snellings. He's helping me run some tech back here.
I'm hearing some distortion as well.
Yeah, I just heard it when he spoke as well.
Okay. How about
Try to hit mute for a second and see if that fixes it. All right. Okay, good. I don't hear it now. So maybe it's an opportunity if we go back and forth, just hit mute. Thank you, Mayor, for having me here today. My name is Aaron Johnson. I represent the Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections. I have the honor of serving the people of Fulton County. I'm one of 5 members. I am one of the 2. There's 5 members on the board. 2 members are appointed by the Fulton County Democratic Party. 2 are appointed by the Fulton County Republican Party, and then the chair of the board is chosen by the Board of Commissioners. I happen to be one of the 2 chosen for the appointed by the Democratic Party. I started serving on the Board of Registration and Elections in 2018. It has been nonstop for us ever since I joined the board. They told me that it'll be a nice, quiet, easy appointment. So I said, absolutely, I'd love to do it. And right after I got appointed in July of 2018, we had the elections for Abrams and Kemp and all the things that happened around that. Then just when we thought we were smoothing out, we had COVID. And then when we got around COVID, we had the Trump election. So it's been nonstop for me since I've been here, but I've learned a lot and had the continual honor of serving.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to go ahead and bring in our first guest. For those of you all who are watching, We will bring you in as you are coming up for your question so we don't crowd the screen with all these bubbles. We're still a little low tech here, but go ahead. This is a familiar face to those of you all in South Fulton. Ms. Kenya Johnson. Go ahead, Judge Johnson.
Good day. No disruption. I apologize.
Did you have a question?
No question, sir. I apologize.
Okay, we are going to ask. We have a YouTube chat that people can join to watch the YouTube chat. So please, if you just go to khalidcares.com, if you got the text message, we'll be sending it out so that people can see those questions. Give me 1 second.
And if you'd like, Mr. Mayor, I can go ahead and some of the questions that I've received already, I can start tackling them if that works for you or whatever works best.
Please do.
The first thing that I want to do is I want to avoid using the word discrepancies and irregularities. What I've found is that when a lot of people don't understand something, they use words like that. And what it does is it adds fuel to the fire of something must be wrong because I don't understand it, or something must be wrong because I haven't figured it out yet. So when you use words like discrepancies, like for instance, you and I had a discussion about two different numbers that show up on the report, being the, like what's the difference between the total number of votes and total number of ballots cast. The reason why that number is different, and the number will more than likely be different a lot of the times, is if you ever have a 4-page or a 5-page ballot, each one of those pages will count when you're running them. So if I walk in and it's 4 pages, it's going to say 1 voter and 4 ballots. That's the way the system works. So when you see those numbers up on the screen, the number of ballots cast is not necessarily an indicator of how many people came out and voted for that election. So it's not really a discrepancy. It's just that's the way the state has the system put together. So when you go and when you look at the numbers, that's what's there. But it's not really a discrepancy. The only time that number should match is on days where you might have, let's say you went in and there was an election, maybe 1 or 2 people, and when you pull up your ballot on the screen, you only have 1 page. Then more than likely it will be closer. But if you recall, our last election was tremendously long. We had all the judges. We had everybody ran for state house and senate seats. And then you had, I think the Republicans and the Democrats both had like 10 questions or 8 questions or something like that. It was a long list of questions. So it caused the ballot to be multiple pages. So that's the difference in that. A couple other things, and I'm very excited that they had the January 6th hearings today in Congress, because it brought out a lot about elections that people keep asking us questions about. Even here we are 2 years later, we're still talking about the 2020 elections because, that's where we are right now with the country. But there were so many things that people learned during that election. People just didn't pay attention. A lot of people, when they go as a poll watcher, they don't know what their actual abilities are. When they go and they volunteer to work at a polls, or they're standing at a poll, a lot of people don't know you can't campaign within 150 feet. So when a poll manager comes outside and pushes you back or tells you can't move, if a person didn't know that before they got there, then they feel like they're being treated differently than everybody else. We had one person whose child was a candidate. So obviously they had all day long on election day, they had that candidate's t-shirt on. And then they went to go and vote, but they didn't know that they could not wear that t-shirt in a polling location because they didn't pay much attention to elections. So when they were told, they argued that their vote was being suppressed. And I tell people you got to be very careful because voter suppression is real, and voter suppression is much more intricate than not allowing you to walk in with a t-shirt. The lady was told that she could go in, she either had to flip the t-shirt around or cover it, but it's just a mere fact that she didn't know that you couldn't walk in there. She felt like she was being treated differently than everybody else, and that tends to happen a lot. So I know we got a lot of questions to go through. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things, but I do want to let people know that Fulton County elections is top notch. Is there any such thing as a 100% perfect election? Absolutely not. But Fulton County has gone through the coal more than any other county in the state of Georgia, both in the state and nationally, about our procedures. We're right now being watched by the Secretary of State's and Oversight Committee is looking at whether or not we're doing what we need to do in order to not be taken over by the state. And every time they come through right now, we're meeting all the bars. So it shows that a lot of the things that you hear are not true. And I know that I can only debunk some of them. I know that I can only go and say that these things aren't right. And I can only go so far. And, people believe what they believe, but we know what the truth is.
Thank you so much for that. Could you, one of the, and I would just ask you to just reiterate, and sorry for if I've used the wrong, word, but this difference between total votes and ballots cast. Could you go through that just once more?
Okay, so you're a voter. You walk in, you count as one vote because you're one voter. Your vote counts. However, the ballot may have multiple pages. If you recall, like I said, this year on the ballot, we had everything from U.S. Senate. Actually, we had U.S. Senate, governor, lieutenant governor, all the constitutional offices, all the state offices, county offices, judges. All of these make multiple pages. And when you go through that's your ballot. So each page is considered a ballot. If you look at when you swipe from page to page, that is a ballot. Or if you got your absentee, I know in theory you think, well, it's just one long ballot. But the ballot count counts the actual pages that the election had, not the number of people that came through. They're two totally separate things. So putting them together serves no justice for us. And I get it, folks don't understand that. But once they are two totally different numbers.
Got it. So I want to ask you this question. There has been some talk from folks about having a recall.
A recall or recount?
I'm sorry, recount.
Okay.
A recount of the election. What are the requirements for a recount? What needs to happen for a recount to happen?
Primarily between the first and the second place person, there needs to be there needs to be less than a 0.5% differential. The reason why that is because now with electronic counting, back in the good old days and everybody counted by hand, there was an opportunity to be off by ballots. Every time you count them, they may be slightly different. But in this day and time, when you do, it used to be actually 1%. It has now been reduced to 0.5%. Because as you go back and you count, the machines are counting, so they're going to be pretty much the same the entire time. So if a candidate is within 0.5%, meaning as the two top candidates, their numbers are maybe, say, 27.8% and 27.6%. That's within the 0.5% margin. So then the candidate, the second place candidate, or the candidate that wants to recall, has 2 days to then go back after the counts are done. They have 2 days to go back and ask for a recount. Now, I know why the question keeps coming up right now. I'm going to go out on a limb. DeKalb County did a recount, but we have to remember the reason why DeKalb County did a recount is totally different than what's going on in Fulton County. In DeKalb County, they had a candidate that withdrew from the race and should have been taken off the ballot. But for some reason, that person was not taken off the ballot. And when that person wasn't taken off the ballot, you know, you get your ballot and it has an erroneous person on there. So what they did was they went back and did a recount because of that, not because of the machines were wrong or anything like that. That was the reason they did it in DeKalb. In Fulton County, we didn't have that issue. Now, we have had several candidates that came out on a losing end to go back and say, I want to have a recount for various reasons, but none of those reasons have fallen within the law.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate now.
Okay.
Something happened with the machines in DeKalb County. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
The problem in DeKalb, it was an error based on a candidate they put a candidate on the ballot that should not have been there, which caused the problem.
Why was the candidate not supposed to? Did they withdraw
Yes.
at the last minute?
I don't know if you heard me earlier. So a candidate withdrew from a race, and the candidate somehow ended up there, and there was an issue because of that. We didn't have that issue here. So what we then had was a lot of losing candidates come and say, well, they're doing a recount in DeKalb County. You should do one here. But I mean, they're doing a hand count in DeKalb County. You should do one here. Well, it failed for a different reason that they were doing it in DeKalb County. We didn't have that issue in Fulton County. We didn't have that issue in Colquitt County. We didn't have it in Irwin, and we didn't have it in Tibbs County. So if a county has a particular issue that they want to rectify or that they want to adjudicate, then it can't be placed upon everybody to do the same thing if they didn't have the same issue.
Got it. There was. I'm going to stick on this DeKalb thing. I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a little bit.
Okay.
It's my understanding that because of this error, there was a reversal between the top vote getter and the bottom vote getter.
I'm not sure. It could be, but listen to what you said. Because of that error,
right?
We didn't have that error in Fulton County, so you're placing something on us that did not happen. So we have to stick to what actually happened.
Understood. So for those, again, this is my last time for those conspiracy theorists who were saying if they could do it to the machines in DeKalb, or if they could do it in DeKalb, why can't they do it in Fulton?
Because they didn't do it to a machine in DeKalb. See, that's the other thing that keeps happening is people keep throwing different things in different scenarios and not talking about what actually happened. Because if we sat here every day, let me tell you one of the things that I love about, that I've always found very interesting. I won't say I love. The candidates that lose always think of ways why they lost, other than they didn't get enough votes. The candidates that win, on the other hand, are totally sure that they got the votes. Even in 2020 with Donald Trump, with all the elected officials, all the candidates, I should say, that talked about the machines didn't work, Dominion this, and the Trump Stop the Steal, all of them, the ones that won, they didn't say that. They only said it for Donald Trump's race, but they didn't come back and say that their race didn't count or their race was stolen. It's only and I get it. A lot of times it's hard for, I mean, even if you go back when Al Gore in 2000 ran against George Bush, there was a time that Al Gore was hanging on to the fact that he probably won the race, but then he got to a point that he realized that it was better for the country to heal and do the right thing than to keep sticking to, well, I didn't lose because I lost. And if you look at when John Kerry ran, Donald Trump ran, but if you look at somebody like when Roy Barnes lost, that was a shocker to the state of Georgia. Roy Barnes on that night acknowledged that he lost. And most candidates in their heart generally know that they're lost. They're just consistently looking for a reason as to why they lost, as opposed to they got fewer votes than somebody else. You're on mute.
I hear that. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. Miss Beverly is joining us. Miss Beverly, I'm going to ask everyone if when you come on for your question, if you will show your video if you can, and just tell us your whole name, put your whole name under your title so that we know who it is that we are speaking to. So go ahead, Miss Beverly. It looks like we have lost Miss Beverly. All right, I thought that we would have some people with some more questions. We may have to revisit this. I don't know that we gave folks enough time, but perhaps if we are still seeing these concerns, perhaps this is a conversation that we can have after the June 21st runoff. For
Mr. Mayor, just FYI, Judge Johnson, Kenya Johnson said she got kicked out. She's trying to get back in. I don't know if he can see her in the waiting room.
I cannot, but as soon as she comes back in, we will.
I don't know if she has a question. She just is in the waiting room. I just wanted to let you know.
Got you. So for those of you all who don't have a question, but you are just watching, I'm going to go over to our YouTube chat. You can find us on YouTube, youtube.com/Khalid Cares. And you can just go to khalidcares.com and you can play the video. You can play this live stream right out of khalidcares.com. I'm going to check if you have questions and you are watching on YouTube, please throw those questions in the chat. We're looking on the chat. So one question that I hear, and I hear this quite often, that on election night, you know, for those first few hours, you start seeing results coming in with, and it'll say, you know, this many votes with 0 precincts reporting. I was told that those were the early vote ballots. Is that true? Is that not true? What are the votes that we see those first few hours of any election night where it says 0 precincts reporting?
They're absolutely early voting numbers. So what happens is, you know, Fulton County has one of the most robust early voting mechanisms in the state of Georgia. We do all we can to get people, give people more opportunities to vote, as many as easily as possible. We try to stay within the law, but we try to do everything we can to give people many options to vote. That's why even right now with the runoff election, we have 30 locations open across the county, the same 30 locations that we had open during the primary elections. So, and also we started on Saturday. Most people are starting today, but we started early voting on Saturday so we can at least get one weekend in, because Friday is the last day that we're able to vote. But what happens is between the first day of early voting and the last day of early voting, we cannot count those votes. Those votes have to be held until 7 p.m. on election day or when the polls close. Once the polls close, then they go through the process of uploading the ballots. And when they upload the ballots, the numbers that are submitted to the Secretary of State's office that you see come up on the little screen with the pie chart will show the early voting numbers. So most all of the numbers that you see are those numbers. Then they start trickling in as they come with the precincts for the night that have come in from our election centers, our voting, our election nights, our vote centers, which we have 9 vote centers across the county. Those numbers start coming in, and that's when you see the number starting to go. As far as the precincts reporting.
Understood. I'm going to go back to this question. I think DeKalb is, and it's really unfortunate. DeKalb has the events in DeKalb have opened up. It seems that whenever, and I'm going to be transparent, right? I'm a candidate who won an election, right? So I believe in the numbers, but because I won. But my deeper concern is that as more, well, I won't say as more, but every time we have a situation like the one that we're hearing about in DeKalb, it erodes people's confidence in elections, and I worry that has a way of depressing voter turnout. You know, I mean, as a brother who sits in a lot of barbershops, you know, talking to a lot of black men, we have the lowest voter, turnout amongst any group. Black women have the highest voter turnout. Black men have the lowest voter turnout. And when I talk to a lot of black men, they will say, well, you know, it's already rigged. They know who they're going to get in there anyway. They've all made the decisions. Every black man that doesn't vote doesn't say that, but several do say that. And my fear is that the more distrust that we have of our election system and our election machines, the less people vote. And my fear is that the people who could be most helped are being convinced to be the least involved in the system, right? So as a movement for Black Lives activist, one of the ways that I got involved into local politics and running for offices, we started doing research on, things like, police brutality, no-knock warrants, things like that, police reform, on housing justice and income inequality, and making sure that places like the city of Atlanta and the city of South Fulton had affordable housing. A lot of those policies are decided at the local level, right, by local government officials whom you can not only go and vote for, but whose meetings you can attend. So we're having a meeting tomorrow night at City Hall, and anyone in the city can come and attend that meeting and talk to me or any other person after the meeting. You can't always, everybody can't hop a jet and fly and talk to, your congressman or the president, but you can, talk to your city council people. And even though these races have the greatest, I feel, impact on our everyday lives, they have some of the lowest voter turnout. And if people don't feel a confidence in the system, that turnout just becomes that much, that much less. And again, the people that are most in need of affordable housing, the people that are, Black men who are at the greatest risk of being victims of police misuse of force, become the people who vote the least and therefore have the least influence on the system. So as a fellow brother, how do you think we address that issue? And how do we restore some faith in our elections?
First of all, I think that the bigger issue, every time well, first, I believe you can. Having people like you who has been able to come down to elections, we talk all the time about elections, have won an election, understand how important it is to get people to come out and vote, understanding that if you didn't go out and work and people didn't go and vote for you, you wouldn't be where you are to be able to do the things that you are trying to do. So that's number one. Showing them where you came from to where you are is a testament to the fact that voting works. The second thing is we have to stop giving life to these conspiracies that really only are designed to distract us from what we need to do. We know we need to vote. Sometimes we don't feel like it, sometimes we don't, and we offer excuses to everyone to be able to go out to not go vote. And we got to stop giving people excuses. You're right. One of the things that I talk about when I go to schools or any other location or anytime I'm talking to a group about elections, government is the only thing you can't run from the day you're born to the day you die. Everything about you, everything you do, I tell kids in school, when you got on the bus this morning, a government determined that bus picking you up, how fast that bus can go, the safety measures that that bus has to go through. That a government determined that cars have to stop to allow kids to walk across the street. And you're right, local government has the greatest impact, but it also has the lowest turnout because it has the smallest amount of money that's put into it when it comes to these commercials and things of that nature. If you watch the news right now, just watch the news right now, you will see our federal races. I guarantee you probably about every third to fifth commercial, you're going to see a federal election. Right now, we see the US Senate races, the 2 US Senate races. Then we see the congressional races that are in runoffs. Later on, we're going to see way more than that. But lower races just don't have the money to compete with that. But that being said, they have a broader net that they have to cast. You can go to the barbershops, you can go to all these other places and talk to people directly. But what we have to do is not allow conspiracy theorists and talk to continue to permeate through our communities and make people believe that it's not worth doing. We need to talk more about why we should be voting instead of talking about why we shouldn't be voting, or what if this, or what if that. I mean, what if is the biggest 2-letter word in the English language, because we can if anything to death. And if we continue to do that, then we're not going to get people to vote. I heard one of the things you were talking about is that you said elections are rigged. I heard a candidate say one time that, we go out and vote, we run elections and we go out and vote, and then everybody goes to vote on election day, and then the chairman of the county and the county manager go in the back room and they choose who they're going to win. And that is just absolutely untrue. They say the chairman of the county runs elections. The chairman of the county does not run elections. The elections board runs the elections. The power of the elections in the state of Georgia is, and not just the state of Georgia, but across the country, elections boards all over. If you watched, I don't know if you've been watching the hearings today, but one of the people that they talked to in the congressional hearings this morning on the January 6th issue, they're talking to Philadelphia's elections board members. You know why? Because Philadelphia and Pennsylvania is one of the places that Donald Trump wanted to overturn the elections. And they understand how important elections boards are across the country. So that's why they had him there to discuss what they were going through and all the things and the death threats that he got. And he was a Republican. That was the amazing thing. He was a Republican, or is a Republican, but they're going after him because these conspiracy theorists are allowed to just continue to say things that make absolutely no sense, but we give it life. And as long as we give it life, we're going to have to battle. We got to be mindful when we're giving it life. We're going to have to then turn around and battle trying to get people to go and vote. And don't get me wrong, I understand. Sometimes you have to explain to people. Sometimes people don't have a passion for something. I tell you, the reason why I'm so passionate about voting, when I was 17 years old and I was getting ready, you know, when you turn 18, you fill out the card so you can register to vote. Well, my grandmother, who was alive at the time, said that when she turned 18, she wasn't able to go vote. My mother, when she turned 18 and registered to vote, she went to jail for trying to go and vote. So now for me, it's a duty to make sure that when I go out, I not only exercise my right to vote, but I do everything that I can to make sure everyone in my community, everyone that looks like me, everyone that not just thinks like me, but has the ability to go out and exercise their right to vote. So it's hard. It's really hard. But as long as we allow the conspiracy theories and the what ifs to continue to permeate, we're always going to have a hard time trying to get people to vote. You're on mute.
Going back to this issue of the cab again, we're going to be revisiting it through the night as people join in. We're not going to keep you too much longer. We want to be respectful of your time. But first, let me ask you about can you explain on election night how the votes are counted, how many times they're counted? Does that happen at the precinct and then again at some room? Do people come up and do they come and pick the voting machines up? I know that there are receipts that are put on the door. Can you just walk us through that process and who has access to the machines during that time? Can Chairman Pitts or a county commissioner like walk into the room where the counting is happening? Where is the room that the counting is happening? Does it happen in the precinct, as I said, or do they take the machine somewhere else and do it? Can you just explain all of that?
So first of all, if Chairman Pitts were to walk into the room where where it was being counted, every news station in the state in Metro Atlanta would be there because they're already there. There is no back room where where votes are being counted. So what happens is you walk in, it's election day. We'll just take election day, for example. Election day, you come in, you go over to a church around the corner, you go to Cliftondale or wherever, but you go in and you vote, right? You know, you get your little card, you put it in, you tap who you want on the screen. You look at it, you hit vote, and it gives you an opportunity to review your ballot. Once you review your ballot, then you hit print and it prints it out on a piece of paper. You can look at it again. Now, one thing I want to mention right here, if you ever find a discrepancy, like some people said with this redistricting that happened, well, I'm in the 5th district of Fulton County and it's not on the ballot. Or I'm looking for this candidate and it's not on the ballot. If you have any questions while it's on the screen or on that paper, that's your opportunity to go over to the one of the poll workers, and then you're able to then maybe adjust if you need to. Then you put it in the ballot. You put it in the scanner, that big box, you drop your paper in and it's scanned into the scanner that's where your ballot is cast at that point, right? So once it's cast, there's nothing we can do. If there was an error, that error is done, and then you go. So the next thing that happens is at the end of the night, all those scanners have cards in them, and the cards are pulled. But before I get to that, let me back up to the ballot marking devices. They're called BMDs. That machine that you press, that machine is not where your ballot is stored. It's a glorified printer. You press what you want, it prints it out on a piece of paper, and then it's on to the next one. But once you put it in the scanner, Then the cards are pulled that night. Every machine, they're pulled at the end of the night. At the end of early voting, another thing for early voting, those machines are not pulled until election night as well. So the cards are pulled. Once the cards are pulled, we have two what we call runners. The poll managers are the ones that pull the cards, right? Then we have runners. There's a two-person team that transports those cards from the polling location over to our voting center. As I mentioned earlier, we have 9 voting centers across the county. And the reason why we have 9 voting centers is because our county is so large. You know, some of the smaller counties, they don't necessarily need it, and they don't have 6 o'clock traffic on a Tuesday in Atlanta either. So Atlanta, for Fulton County, we have 9 centers. Those cards by a two-person team, they have to agree. They take them to the voting center.
So let me just stop you there. It's there are two people. They're always together.
Correct.
Not, you know, it's not the case that there's like one person picking up the cards and then like somebody can, I don't know, do whatever to that person and switch the cards out, whatever.
There are, not only are there 2 people, but in certain instances, we have escorts, police escorts going from the vote center to the elections office. We have a great partnership with the law enforcement in Fulton County. So between the sheriff's office, the marshals, we have security at every point in order to assure that if somebody, because one of the things that happened with conspiracy theorists is that they were following staff members. After the 2020 election, we had people that were following staff members from location to location. They were following them home. We were getting threats, all that. But let's go back to this so I can make sure this. So they leave the vote centers and then they go to the warehouse. Once they go to the warehouse, that's where it's uploaded. Now the warehouse is over on English Avenue. And I don't know if you've ever been there on election night, but campaigns generally send somebody, or at least the campaigns that can afford it. The Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the various campaigns, they all send people over to the warehouse to watch the process. So when you hear people say the chairman was able to come into this back room, it's an open warehouse that we even have our election night meeting in this warehouse, but there are people everywhere when the ballots are being counted and the ballots are being uploaded. The Democratic Party, as well as the Republican Party and candidates, all send election night watchers to see the process to ensure that things that we hear about happening don't happen. And I highly encourage you at some point to come by and see some of the things that happen at election night. So now we go back to the warehouse. That's where you see the numbers that you see on television, where, you know, when you start seeing the numbers fly up on television and things of that nature. And it's run multiple times. The numbers are ran a couple thousand times to ensure that this is the accurate number. And then once that number is done, we'll get a preliminary vote total. Now, this is another thing that happens on election night. A lot of people will see, and I'm just going to use an arbitrary number here. Let's say it's 150. Your race had 150 votes on election night. There are a couple of things that can change that number between election night and certification. We have what UACOVA, which are the overseas ballots. Then let's say there were some people who had some issues as it related to the provisional ballots.
I'll give an example. I go to my polling place. I'm at the wrong polling place. They give me a provisional ballot, or
you left your license. You left your license at the house.
And so that instead of being able to vote on the machine, they give me a paper ballot.
Correct. And you have until Friday to what we call cure that ballot. So let's say I'm gonna do an easy one. You left your license at home, right? they say you said, I swear this is where I'm supposed to be. This is my precinct. I know this is my polling location. So they go ahead and give you a provisional ballot. Those provisional ballots are not counted that day. What happens is that person will have up until 5 p.m. on the following Friday to bring their license in and say, see here, this is my license. I really am who I say I am. And then we move that ballot over and it is then counted. Or if there are other reasons why a ballot had to be cured, then that's why they would go ahead and count those ballots. So you may go from 150 to 153. So a lot of times people will see numbers on election night, but even if I'm trying to think, who was that? Oh, Alaska. I don't know if you know, Alaska had elections on Saturday, right? Today, they still didn't know who the winners were because the ballots are still being counted. So a lot of times when you see a candidate has won, what they do is they look at, well, let me back up. We'll get to that in a second. Then once on Friday, once all the ballots are in, we got that magic number that we need. The county then certifies the elections. Once the county certifies the elections, they send it over to the Secretary of State's office. And the Secretary of State's office then has to certify elections as well. And then once it's certified, we move on. If you remember with the whole Trump situation, he was trying to stop the process between those two. And obviously it didn't work. But so that's how the process works on election night. There is no back room full of ballots. There is no secret room where they determine who is the candidate of choice. It's a process that goes on. And I even tell you this, back in 2018, when I first got on the board, it was the Kemp-Abrams race. Every Democrat in Metro Atlanta wanted to get rid of Rick Barron. I don't know if you recall, but that was around the time that John Ossoff lost against Karen Handel in North Fulton County. And between those races, everybody blamed Rick Barron because of what had happened. Flash forward 2 years, it switched. Republicans hated Rick Barron and Democrats love Rick Barron. Why? Because he followed the rules. He followed wherever the rules led him, that's where he went. And it's unfortunate that it depends on whether I win or whether I lose as to whether or not I'm upset about the elections process. And I agree. Senate Bill 202 and a couple of other things that have happened to us are extremely unfortunate, unfair, and we got to find ways to fix that. But as far as the process that these elections officers are having, as I mentioned, they're not 100% and they will never be 100%. But I do believe that we are doing a phenomenal job and the elections process is safe and secure.
So I want to I want to back up to something that you said about how many times the votes are counted. I, in my previous life was a field director, which means I ran the canvassing and the door knocking for many campaigns. And one of my favorite things to do was to try and get the election results before they were announced on TV, because as anybody who's followed me and watched Khalid Cares TV knows that on election night, each precinct is supposed to post the receipt from the machines in that precinct that show how many candidates each person got in a particular precinct. And so if you're in a race that's small enough, I mean, obviously you can't do it for a statewide race, but for a city race, a city council race or a school board race, and sometimes even a county commission race, you could go to all of the polling precincts if you got enough people on your campaign. You can go to all of them or many of them and see how the vote is looking voting location by voting location, because each voting location they're supposed to post those receipts. So I'm assuming that that is one tally, but then you're saying they're tallied many, many more times after that. The
Well,
cost.
it's a computer process that just goes through. That's like a preliminary tally. That should show you that the machines have had X number of people and this number of people have actually gone through. But even in that precinct, you're still going to miss the provisional ballots. Early voting is going to make that number off, a little off. If you go back and look at some of the statewide and races that we've had before, early voting tends to lean Republican. So when you get those numbers, you'll have, let's say it's a race that's contested Democrat and Republican across the state. Those numbers will, you can go look at the tape that day and it tells you what happened that day, but it won't tell you what happened for early voting. So with early voting, it could throw those numbers off. It could support those numbers. Either way, there are two different ways to look at it. And, you know, it's just, it is, you're right. They are supposed to put the tapes for each machine in that precinct on the door so it can be viewed. We've had a couple of issues for various reasons, but you're right, that is supposed to happen. And that does give you a temperature of what happened that day, but it may not give you the full vision of what happened during that race.
Thank you for that. And so we've had, if you're just now joining us, I'm talking, this is Mayor Khalid, obviously Mayor of the City of South Fulton, and we are talking with one of the members of the Fulton County Board of Elections who happens to be also a City of South Fulton resident. And he's just explaining, trying to dispel some of the myths and rumors and concerns that people have had around this May 24th primary. A lot of the current anxiety around voting has really arisen out of events that happened in DeKalb's election. So I am very proud to bring on my friend, DeKalb County Commissioner Ted Terry, who can maybe speak a little bit more because we're still seeing a lot of questions in the chat about what exactly happened in DeKalb. Ted, can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, good evening, Mayor. Hey, good to see you. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, sir, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. If you can, turn your camera on so we can see your lovely face. But if not, we understand.
I'm about to be mobile.
Got you. One of the questions that we've heard. So Mr. Johnson gave us some explanation earlier that a candidate dropped out of the race, I guess at the last minute, or withdrew from the race at the last minute, and this last minute change to the ballot to try and remove them somehow threw the machines off. That's what we've heard. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And we appreciate you having this discussion. And I think having like a post election report is always really good. And what you're doing here is, I think, giving everyone a chance to reflect on the election that we just had. Certainly, we have a runoff on June 21st. And so I think these topics are really, really timely. And I'll just speak from firsthand experience because I was, in the room, so to speak, when it was discovered that zero votes on election day were shown in that ticker tape that you talked about, in that post-election day little ticker tape they post. Almost all but 4 precincts, the candidate Michelle Long Spears received 0 votes in.
Even though she voted for herself, which is what I have heard.
Yes, absolutely, yes. You could argue maybe just no one liked her, but even for herself and her husband in their home precinct, they voted for themselves, obviously. And remember seeing on the back of their ballots the name, Michelle Long Spears. They remember looking and seeing, oh yeah, okay, it looks good, because they always ask you to check your ballot, right, Aaron? Before that's when the poll worker always says, hey, just look on the back, check, make sure everything's good, and then put it in the scanner, right? And so they knew they voted for themselves or voted for Michelle. So that was sort of the alarm that something had gone wrong. But what you said about the candidate that withdrew is exactly really what caused the error ultimately, because this candidate, you're right, qualified, and then pretty soon after withdrew. Not enough time for the absentee ballots to not have been changed, but the early vote and certainly election day, the candidate was not on the ballots that withdrew. However, what we surmise, is reported to have happened, is that because that withdrawal of the candidate ultimately didn't get updated in the programming of the tabulators. And so what you had was the first step of voting, where you do your ballot marking device. I think Aaron was talking about that earlier. You do the touch screens and you print out in essence, who you voted for, right? So there was no issue with that system. And we know that because ultimately when those ballots, when those printouts were counted, that's when the 0 votes went to more votes. Because they just didn't get tabulated the right way. And it basically, fell on this candidate that withdrew. 4 slots should have received data. Instead, only 3 slots received data. And so it skewed everything up, and it basically required a hand recount. But once the hand recount was done, the evidence was all there. It was, in essence, an election audit. And it, sort of, I think, is impeachable because, you have that paper trail where you can literally go back. And I'll just say one quick thing. I'll turn back over to you, because the DeKalb County Elections Office, we had 60 workers come in on Memorial Day at 8 a.m., hand counted ballots all day in a warehouse that didn't have a very good AC. And so, I think a lot of times we think about elections as these things that just sort of happen, but there are literally thousands of people that are behind the scenes making this happen. And the reason why things get so complex is because we got a lot of voters. We're the biggest election jurisdictions, Fulton, DeKalb. The more voters you have, the more logistics, the more, resources that have to be put into it. And so it just makes elections more complicated. But I think the DeKalb elections staff and team did a remarkable job. I think it's clear that the withdrawal of the candidate is really ultimately what crescendoed and caused all of the additional errors.
So I've got 2 questions. My first one will be to both of you. If something like that could cause such an error, do we just need to, from henceforth and forevermore, once the candidates have qualified, once we have created the ballot, just don't touch them anymore? Don't fool. If you drop out, your name is still going to be there.
So it depends. Depending on the timing, everything about elections is timing. We've talked about it before when we talked about other issues as it relates to, there is a process that goes through. As Commissioner Terry mentioned a minute ago, you do have all these people working behind the scenes, because most people just think about elections as I go vote and that's it. But there's a process from the moment you even get ready to qualify, then you have to, once everyone qualifies, there's a small level. That's when people start checking to see if these people are qualified. Then it goes over to, there's a place that puts the ballot, they quote unquote build the ballot. Then the ballot has to be reviewed. Then it has to go back for review. All these things happen. And in the meantime, candidates are running, candidates may quit. So many things could happen, but depending on when a person drops out, we had candidates to qualify and 2 weeks later get off the ballot. So we couldn't, they got off before the ballots were built. So I can't say that you should absolutely just leave it, because if a person has withdrawn, then you want to make sure that constituents, that voters are voting for the people that can be there. And people are voting for folks that want to be on the ballot.
I hear that. And my next question for the both of you, and this is another big picture question. And I'm going to take off my elected official hat and just put on my everyman hat. It feels like some of the concerns that we're having are just general concerns about computers and software, period. You know, as I get older, the first gentleman, who's much younger than me, teases me all the time. He's like, "You're just getting old, Khalid," because I swear that my iPhone is losing contacts. Every time there's like an upgrade to the system, I lose contacts of people that have been in my phone for years. There, and I know before my mother passed, she was always thinking something was going on with her computer, and really she just had downloaded too many things, or she had a virus or whatever. I say all that to say computers seem to be as fallible as anything else. Why not just go back to paper ballots? I've always been concerned that but before this newest iteration of voter machines, we didn't even get a printout. You just put a card in and then you gave your card to somebody. At least now a printout is made, but I still don't get to take anything home. Why not just go back
expensive
to paper? If we're going to end up hand counting things anyway, why not just go back to hand marked ballots or the old punch card ballots that you see in New York still?
Okay, no hanging chads, please, Mayor.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, but the Scantrons work perfectly, and they're so much cheaper. Like elections now are like 3 times more expensive, if not more, if you're in a big jurisdiction like Fulton or DeKalb. And so, Mayor, I mean, I'm a county commissioner, and I got to fund the elections department, and there's even more money that we're putting into it. And we have an affordable housing crisis, we have a healthcare crisis, a mental health issue, transportation issues. We have all these things that we have to invest in, and we have to spend all this extra money on this very complex voting process. When you're exactly right, Mayor, just bubble in the answers, and then put it in the scanner, and then we're good, right? And just keep it moving. And it's a paper trail. It can never be manipulated because it's always there. But I think to your earlier point, you're right. I think the technology, I think if you don't understand something, and I'm not saying that it's like not for want of trying, because I try to understand this stuff. And at some point I'm like, okay, don't tell me anymore, please. Mm-hmm. Like you're melting my mind. And so I think it's very human, as human nature, if you don't understand something, to not trust it. And so I think this is just where obviously Aaron, as a citizen member of the Board of Elections, is there for oversight. There's a reason why both political parties, have representatives on the board. It's seen as a check and balance to fairness. And I think, that right there is the most important part. If the citizen board members that we entrust to look at this have done their due diligence, and I know they have, and they say, look, we're everything, like Aaron said, Director Barron was following the law. He was following every single thing. And Aaron knew that because they were watching it and they were getting reports. And so that's what it's about, is accountability. All right. You don't have to understand it, but know that there's someone who does understand it, who has the public's best interest in mind.
Aaron, can we go back to Scantrons?
Absolutely not. We'll go back to Scantrons if we go back to box cell phones. If we go back to that, then we'll go back to Scantron. One of the things I was talking to, and we'll get to that, but let me hit a couple of points in that. You mentioned that we hand count anyway. We don't hand count anyway. That's under extreme circumstances. If we need to, we may hand count. Hand count is not out of the question, but it's not something that we, as the commissioner mentioned, we simply cannot do it. In theory, we could, but in evolution, it's going to be very hard to go back. It's going to be about as hard to go back as it is to going back to a box phone. Because once you start, as much as people hate computers and all of that, we use them so much. All the people that hate computers, ask them, do they have a cell phone? Now, my aunt's 96. She still has a flip phone and doesn't text. But the average person who has concerns about computers, more than likely, they have some form of smartphone. And the not trusting part, it's very hard because if you think about it, people don't trust elected officials. There is and I know this is not Commissioner Terry, but there's a commissioner that's under indictment right now in another state. But should we not trust that Commissioner Terry is going to do the right thing? He's showing us that he's doing the right thing. And if I always say, well, you know, Commissioner Terry, that commissioner over there in Texas is being indicted and putting that on him, it's unfair and unfortunate. And that's the same thing that's happening to us as it relates to elections. Elections are fair. Elections, and like Commissioner Terry said, these people are working exceptionally hard to follow the law and to do everything possible to make sure that every person's vote is counted. To have someone come back and say, well, I don't trust them because of some erroneous reason that doesn't even make sense.
Let me do this. I'm gonna do a couple rapid fire questions because we're gonna try and get you guys out of here in the next 15 minutes. I'll ask if you can keep your answers a little bit shorter, and I will try and keep my questions a little shorter.
All right, I was about to say now. I was coming there.
Yeah. What? So here, what happens when the scanner isn't working? That happened according to one of our viewers at CT Martin.
Well, the thing, I'll speak for Fulton County if Commissioner Terry wants to speak to DeKalb. In Fulton County, our goal, we do have a two-step process. Number one, we try to have 2 scanners in every precinct. However, if not, you can do one of 2 things. So if you walk up to a scanner and it's not working, you can either give it to, there's a little, we keep it in this little box. There's this little box you drop your ballots in as you're leaving if you have to go. And then the poll manager will then come back once the scanner is fixed and scan all the ballots to make sure they're through. If you do not feel comfortable that that's going to happen, you can sit and wait. We have technicians that are running between every couple of precincts or polling locations rather. So if there's a point where there's something wrong with the scanner, like we had at Cliftondale Clubhouse, then a technician was there within 7 minutes. They worked on it, they fixed it, and within 20 minutes, it was all done.
So for those 7 minutes, do you just hold those and run them through later, or what's going on?
Oh, so you missed it. Yes. So there's a box. You take your ballot. You can do one of 2 things. You can take your ballot after you had it printed. You take the ballot and you put it down in this little box it keeps all the ballots while the technician is working if you want to leave. If you don't want to leave, you can stay there with your ballot until the technician fixes it, and then you can run it through the scanner yourself.
So if you got any concerns, the scanner's down, stay there till the technician comes so you can.
Nope, that's not what I'm saying. If you can,
right.
But again, our staff will make sure that your ballot is counted.
All right. Was the Wi-Fi enabled on the Dominion machines in this last election?
No.
Okay.
There is no Wi-Fi on the ballot marking devices. That is a popular misconception that will not die. I don't know how to make it die, but those machines, and the funny thing is somebody will come back and say, well, this machine has Wi-Fi. And like I saw a lady with the Trump hearings today, saying, I saw the little Wi-Fi sign on my computer, on my screen when I was marking my ballot. Our machines do not have Wi-Fi.
But the I want to call them poll pads, because I see people at the polls somewhere. People have access to the internet because they look up your license and they do. So those machines do have Wi-Fi.
So those machines have those machines can, but what they use is, like, we had an issue with redistricting. Because the poll pads had not been updated, we just went ahead and printed out every single voter in Fulton County. But see, don't cross the two. And that's where you get the conspiracy theorists, is when you start crossing things that don't go together. The poll pads and your vote are totally different. The poll pad is only, listen to me. I promise you, every time you cross internet with voting or internet with the ballot marking devices, people hear that, and that's all they hear. They don't hear that a poll pad is not a ballot marking device. You're not voting on a poll pad. You're not voting on anything but a ballot marking device and a scanner. So the fact that we're talking about internet, they're not on the ballot marking devices.
So I want to be clear. At no point are you saying that at no point in the process are the voting machines ever connected to the internet?
Correct.
So they're never connected to the internet. So how do you
listen. If you keep digging, somebody's going to hear you say something that sounds like they are. I'm telling you, there is nothing you're going to say.
Gotcha.
The ballot marking machines do not have the internet.
Got it. All right. So if back to this question about and I'm just reading this directly from the YouTube chat. If I can, I gotta scroll back because it's moving now. Now I can't find it. The question says, if the here it is, with the explanation of ballot pages that you gave in the beginning, shouldn't there always be more total votes cast than ballots casted?
No, because I said a vote is one person. A ballot is how many pages are on a ballot. So if I walk into a room, me by myself, and I am a voter, I am going to be the voter. But then if my ballot has 5 pages, when you look at those numbers, which don't go together, the total votes cast is going to be 1, but the ballot cast is going to be 5. And then it will depend, think about it. Then it also depends on if I got a Republican ballot, a Democratic ballot, or a nonpartisan ballot. Because the nonpartisan ballot was not as long as the Democratic and Republican ballots. So they're not going to be a straight even number. So for every one vote total you have, you're going to have 5 over here. You're not. It all depends on your ballot and what you have on it and how many pages it is.
And would that also be the case for the phenomenon that we know happens where people go and vote for the first page of the ballot and then they leave the other items blank? Or do those count? You know, if I got that 5-page Democrat ballot, but I was just like, I came in here to vote for Stacey. I don't know who all these other people are on here.
Your ballot still has 5 pages.
That's still 5 pages. It's just 5 pages of.
So what's going to happen then, you're going to see it. And I'll tell you, one of the things that you normally see, like you just said, I'm going to vote for X person, but I'm not voting anything else. That's why you see when people walk in, the numbers move. So if you look at the first person, let's say it's 150,000 people voted for person A. Then you go down, probably about 149,000 voted for person B. Then by the time you get to the 5th one, you might be down to 130,000 people. And by the time you get to the 10th one, you might be down to 90,000 people. And that's because people didn't vote straight down the ballot. But they still had that ballot. So that's still, you still got the same number of people that have walked through the door. It's just people chose where they wanted to vote. So those numbers will not match.
And I can say as a mayor and a councilman, I have experienced that when I was running in 2017 as a councilman. Many people did not vote for me and told me they weren't, not me, but they didn't vote for city council. They were just like, it's too many of y'all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to focus on the mayor's race. And maybe if y'all get in a runoff, I'll come back and look at these other, and I've heard that a lot. So that is, I can attest that that's something that's happened to me personally as a candidate. And honestly, before I got so involved in local elections, it was something that I did as a voter. I would get down to public service commissioner or water, whatever the water. I didn't even know what that was, or let alone some of the ballot questions. I might just leave those blank, which is why I spend so much time trying to do voter education now. I'm going to check and see if there are any more questions in the chat that. Well, if someone wants to become, and I just do see a lot of conversation about poll watchers. If someone wants to become a poll watcher or a poll worker, or just wants to get more involved,
Yes, please.
how can they do that?
Mm-hmm.
We're always hiring. I think, honestly, I gotta be honest, Mayor, poll worker, much more impactful, because you literally are there watching the election. and we have a shortage. I mean, we in DeKalb, we were trying to follow Fulton's lead. We raised our minimum wage to $15 for all poll workers because it was competition. And so always encouraging people. I mean, it doesn't matter if you have a full-time job, get election day off. We're trying to make DeKalb County employees get election day as a holiday. And if someone wants to go work and be a poll worker on election day, God bless, please go do it, because that's exactly what the holiday is about, is to participate in your democracy. Just like MLK Day is a day on, election day holiday is a day to participate in our democracy. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm not sure about poll watching, because poll watching you're sort of on the periphery and you can't intrude on people's votes, so it's like, what are you watching? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're watching for someone to be turned away or for there to be intimidation, right? But in terms of what questions I heard tonight about the machines and the tabulators and the computers, being a poll worker is so more important, because you're part of the process. And as Aaron understands it, he's got it down, right? Everything he's talking about, trust it, take it to the bank, because he's lived it and breathed it, right? And so that's what you want. You want people who know this system, who spent time in it, and who know how it's supposed to work.
I think, and thank you for saying that. And I just want to make a second pitch for that. I know that my fellowship tends to skew a little younger than the average electorate or the average poll worker. We have a lot of senior citizens that are poll working, and we are so thankful to have them. But if there are young people who are watching this, if you're good with computers, if you understand how technology works, and you can get that day off, if you work from home, you can get that day off, we really encourage you to come out and become a poll worker, come to poll worker trainings. If you text the word Fulton, I will put it in the chat as well, if you don't know it already, but if you text the word Fulton to 33777, you can learn how I will be covering this in upcoming newsletters for the November election. You can learn how to become a poll worker. We're going to have another hiring event. I've been talking with LaShondra Little. Thank you so much, at Fulton County. We're going to have another hiring event similar to the one that we had in April. We're going to have that before the November election so that you can be involved and learn how to become a poll worker here in Fulton County.
If you don't mind,
go ahead.
I just want to add real quick to this poll worker, poll watcher thing. I agree with Commissioner Terry to go ahead and be a poll worker, because not only that, you get paid. You get paid for the time that you're there. Poll watcher, you're hanging out and watching. But also, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the city of South Fulton and some of the other cities that are working with us in order to identify poll workers for the elections. We've reached out to all the cities across Fulton County. We're doing our normal recruiting, but then we also said, let's go to the elected officials. They have a group of people, they can tap into a resource that we may not be able to tap into. So if you do that through the mayor, or you could go to Fulton Elections and you will see a tab for poll workers as well. FultonElections.com, that is.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for attending this event and just being a part of this conversation. If you learned something, if you heard something that you felt was helpful, I want to encourage you to please let people know that we had this conversation. It will be in the newsletter tomorrow. There will be a newsletter coming out tomorrow that contains this and some information on our upcoming events. I'm going to go ahead and share that information with you now. So tomorrow we do have our city council meeting at City Hall on Fulton Industrial Boulevard at 4 p.m. Space is super limited, so we're meeting in the break room. This is a special call meeting before we go on a summer break for 6 weeks. So this will be our last in-person meeting for some time. We're going to discuss Camelot. We're going to discuss Wolf Creek Amphitheater. We're going to discuss the decorum incident that happened at our last city council meeting. And we're going to take a look at quite a few zoning cases that we have on the books. It's going to be our last zoning meeting for a couple of months. And of course, this week is Juneteenth here in the city of South Fulton and around the country. Here in the blackest city in America, we have prepared an entire day-long festival on Saturday at Wolf Creek Amphitheater off of Camp Creek and Merck Road. So we encourage you to come out. We're going to have fireworks at 9:30 and so much before that. From 1 to 10, we're going to be out there. We are actually also flying Juneteenth flags. We purchased Juneteenth flags, and you'll see those all across our 100 square mile city at all of our city buildings. They went up today. So always you can learn more about what I am doing and what the city of South Fulton is doing by visiting khalidcares.com or by texting the word Fulton to 33777 to sign up for our events. Again, thank you all so much for coming out tonight, and please share this information with a friend. South Fulton forever.